They say walls, remember. If that's true, then my mother's house wasn't just a structure, it was a witness. A vault of memories and whispers that echoed long after her voice was gone. I was 17 when she passed, leaving behind the house she had inherited from her grandmother, a weathered Victorian. With ivy crawling up its bones and a basement no one ever dared to enter. She used to say the house chose its owners and never forgave betrayal. Back then, I thought it was just her way of being poetic. Now, I wonder if she knew something I didn't. After her death, things unraveled quickly. My father remarried within a year to a woman named Clarice, the kind of woman who wore silence like a weapon and perfume like a warning. She never liked the house, said it smelled like history, claimed it gave her headaches. She avoided it like it carried a curse. I only wish it had. When I turned 18, Clarice found a loophole, a legal technicality that allowed her to claim ownership of the house, since my father's name was still on the deed. I protested, I fought, but grief had softened my voice, and the law didn't care about sentiment. Within 6 months, she listed the house for sale. I visited one last time the week before it sold. The ivy was thicker. The wind seemed to whisper, in a language I almost understood. My footsteps echoed through the old wooden floors like they were warning me, urging me to remember something. And then I did. When I was 9, I had followed my mother into the basement. On a stormy night, she thought I was asleep. She had carried a box with strange markings and a bronze key that hung around her neck. She whispered something in a language I didn't know as she crouched near the far wall, and then the wall opened. Just slightly, like a secret stretching its limbs. She slid the box inside, turned the key, and whispered again. I never saw that key again. That memory hit me like thunder. The basement, the wall, the box. My mother's necklace, which was nowhere to be found when she died. Fueled by urgency and anger, I made my way down the basement stairs for the first time in years. The air was thick and electric, like something dormant had awakened. The far wall was different. The stones didn't match. I felt around, pressing and tapping until click. A cold rush hit me as a narrow section of the wall slid open with a groan. Inside, covered in dust and cobwebs, sat a safe, not just a box, a heavy old-world safe with strange engravings, dials, and what looked like a lunar calendar carved into its face, and the key was gone. Clarice sold the house the next morning. I didn't tell her what I found. She wouldn't have believed me anyway, or worse, she would have tried to claim it as hers. But I made a decision that day. If that safe belonged to anyone, it was me, and I would get it back. No matter what it cost. I just didn't know how high that price would be. The day Clarice handed the keys to the new owners. I was there, not out of sentiment, but strategy. The buyers were a quiet couple in their 50s, retired, polite, and utterly unprepared for the house's temper. I watched them smile as they turned the old brass key in the lock, unaware that they were stepping into something far more complicated than creaking floors and leaky faucets. Clarice barely looked back. She had already cashed the check, already redecorated her social media with vacation selfies and spa appointments. She had no idea what she'd just handed away, or what was still inside. But I did. I had one thing left, the memory of the key. The bronze key with the crescent moon tip. That always hung from my mother's neck. I scoured through her old things, the boxers Clarice hadn't bothered to unpack, and found nothing. My mother had been careful. Too careful. That night, I had a dream. I was in the basement again, only this time it was different. Warmer. The air hummed with energy, and the safe glowed faintly, like it recognized me. I approached it, and as I placed my hand on the dial, I heard a voice. My mother's voice. Don't open it without the light. I woke up in sweat. The sentence haunted me all day. What light? I remembered the odd candles she used to burn in her bedroom, thick, dark blue ones with a scent I could never quite place. And the strange glass prism she kept on the windowsill, always catching sunlight at strange angles. Back then, I thought she was just spiritual. Now, I knew she was protecting something, or hiding it. By the third night, I had a plan. The couple hadn't moved in yet, so the house was still empty. I waited until midnight, then slipped in through the side entrance. I knew how to pick the same door I used to sneak out of as a teenager. The house was pitch black and smelled like silence. My flashlight barely pierced the heavy darkness as I descended the basement stairs. The safe was there, waiting. Its presence was magnetic. My fingers tingled just standing in front of it. I knelt beside it, tracing the lunar engravings, wondering what would happen if I tried to open it by force. But something told me not to. Something told me the dream was more than just memory, so I waited. The next day, I visited my mother's old friend Hilda, a mysterious woman with too many scarves and too few answers. She was the kind of person people called a witch, not as an insult, but as a warning. She had helped my mom often, back in the day. I remembered her herbal teas and unreadable eyes. Hilda stared at me for a long time before speaking. She left the key with me. She finally said, "But you're not ready?" "Ready for what?" "To understand what you'll find inside," I pressed. She resisted. "But I didn't come all this way for riddles." "Hilda," I said, voice sharper than I intended, "that house is no longer mine. The safe is all I have left of her. And I know, my mother wouldn't have hidden something so carefully if it wasn't important. Please." There was a long silence. Then she stood, crossed the room, and opened a carved wooden chest. From within, wrapped in a velvet pouch, she pulled out the key. It was just as I remembered. Bronze, warm to the touch, with a crescent tip and carvings that shimmered in the light like they were alive. She told me to give it to you only when the house was no longer yours. I blinked. "Why?" She said, "You'd only understand once it was taken. That grief would blind you, but loss would wake you." My hands shook as I held it. The weight of legacy. The weight of secrets. That night, I returned to the house, again, this time with the key. I sat in front of the safe, and waited for the moonlight to spill through the basement window. When it did, it refracted through the prism I had borrowed from Hilda, and hit the engravings like a spotlight. The metal hummed under my hand. I inserted the key. It fit. The safe creaked, not with rust, but with resistance, like it knew it was being opened before its time. Inside, I didn't find gold or cash or jewels. I found journals. Dozens of them, bound in leather. Written in my mother's handwriting. And in the first one, on the inside cover, was a single sentence: "If you're reading this, they've already started looking for it. Trust no one, not even your own blood." The first journal was written in my mother's unmistakable handwriting, sharp, flowing, a mix of elegance and urgency. But it wasn't just a diary. It was a confession, a warning, and possibly a map. I flipped through the pages like a thief in a palace, careful not to miss anything, even the scribbles in the margins. The entries started just months before she died, and as I read, I realized that her death wasn't just untimely, it was unnatural. She wrote about the Order, a shadowy group obsessed with bloodlines, ancient knowledge, and something she called the Pulse. According to her, the house had been in our family for generations, not by accident, but by design. Each daughter inherited not just bricks and wood, but guardianship of something inside the house, something not of this world. She never named it directly. Instead, she referred to it in code. The heart beneath the floorboards, the sleeping ember, what came before the flame, whatever it was, it lived or waited inside that house. And she had protected it all her life. Then the entries shifted. She mentioned a woman named Celeste, a half-sister I had never heard of. One born before my father. Before me, a daughter. My mother had given up for adoption in secret. After a dangerous encounter with a member of the Order, my breath caught in my throat. If this was true, I wasn't the only heir. Could that be why Clarice had been so eager to claim the house? Was it possible she knew more than she let on? That she wasn't just opportunistic, she was planted. The thought made my skin crawl. Kept reading, there were drawings of sigils. Lunar maps. Dates circled in red. She talked about a convergence, a moment in time when the safe could be opened, and what was inside could be activated. She warned that if it fell into the wrong hands, it wouldn't just destroy our bloodline. It could undo everything. Time, memory, reality. My mother wasn't crazy. She was terrified, and prepared. I sat on the cold basement floor, the journal, clutched in my lap, feeling like the air itself had thickened with secrets. Outside, a storm was brewing. I could hear the distant rumble of thunder like something ancient stirring. That's when I heard it. Footsteps, upstairs. I froze. No one was supposed to be here. The couple who bought the house were out of town. For the week I had checked, and Clarice, she hated this place. She wouldn't come back. I quickly shut the safe and slid the journals back inside, locking it with the bronze key. I pocketed the key and stepped into the shadows of the basement. Just as the footsteps reached the top of the stairs, they were slow, careful, as if whoever it was already knew someone else was inside. I held my breath. The door creaked open. A flashlight beam cut through the darkness. I caught a glimpse of her face, sharp jawline, silver streaks in her dark hair, eyes like knives. It was Clarice, but something was wrong. She looked different, colder, controlled. She didn't call out my name, didn't ask if anyone was there. She simply descended the stairs like she'd done it 1,000 times before. That's when I saw it. The necklace, it was my mother's. The crescent moon key now missing, but the chain unmistakable. I knew then, Clarice had known. All along. I stepped out of the shadows and said her name. She didn't flinch, just turned and stared at me with a strange mix of recognition and disdain. I was wondering when you'd come back, she said, her voice smooth and eerie. You always were your mother's little shadow. What are you doing here? I demanded. Her smile was thin. Collecting what should have been mine. I stepped toward the safe. It was never yours. She laughed, low and bitter. Oh, sweetheart. Nothing in this house was ever yours. You were just the placeholder. My chest tightened. What do you mean? But she didn't answer. She simply turned and walked back up the stairs like the conversation was over. When I reached the top, she was gone. No car, no footprints in the wet grass. Just the echo of a door that hadn't even creaked. I locked the house behind me and ran. That night, I slept with the journal under my pillow and a knife beside my bed. The dream returned, but this time, the basement was on fire. And in the flames, I saw Clarice's face, but it was melting, changing, becoming someone else. Someone I had never seen. Someone who looked like me. The face in the flames haunted me long after I woke. It wasn't just that Clarice had changed in the dream. It was that she had become me. Same eyes. Same scar above the lip. Same terror in her expression when the fire reached her eyes. But dreams lie, right? I tried to convince myself of that, but then the second journal changed everything. I returned to the house the next day with gloves, a flashlight, and a satchel to carry the rest of the journals. I told myself it was for safekeeping. But deep down, I knew. I wasn't going to run anymore. I needed to know. And not just what my mother had hidden, I needed to know who I really was. The second journal was older. Written when my mother was barely 20. Her handwriting was neater than, almost innocent. But the content, anything but. She spoke of rituals. Of women born in her bloodline being marked, chosen not for their strength or purity, but for their frequency, a vibration that matched. Something ancient, buried beneath the house long before it was ever built. The house had been constructed on a convergence point, a place where the veil between dimensions was thin, where the pulse, a force she still never fully named, could occasionally be heard, and sometimes felt. The journal told the story of a woman before her, my great-grandmother, Eleanor, who had been driven mad after failing a ritual. She claimed the walls whispered and the mirrors bled light, that she saw people with her own face, but hollow eyes. What horrified me most wasn't the madness, it was that Eleanor disappeared in 1933, and her body was never found. I put the journal down and paced the basement, the words running like static through my veins. Every creak above me felt like an omen. Every flicker of my flashlight made the shadows jump like they were trying to tell me something. I needed answers, and I knew where to find them. Ilda didn't seem surprised when I showed up at her door. I hoped you wouldn't read too far, she said. Well, I did, I snapped. And now I need you to explain why my mother was writing about bloodlines, rituals, and doppelgangers. She sighed, then opened a drawer and pulled out a velvet pouch. Inside was a photo, black and white, cracked at the corners of a woman that looked exactly like me. But the date on the back said 1933. Eleanor. My chest tightened. I don't understand. Ilda finally spoke, voice soft but urgent. You're not just your mother's daughter, child. You're her echo. The women in your line, the ones who are chosen, they don't just inherit memories. They become vessels, reiterations, resonances. You're not the first with that face. And unless you end this, you won't be the last. What do you mean, end this? She leaned closer. Clarice isn't who you think she is. I blinked. She's not my stepmother. Oh, she was once, but she wasn't born Clarice. I froze. She was born Celeste, my mother's secret daughter. My half-sister, the journal, the bloodline, the betrayal. It all clicked. Clarice knew. I whispered. She knew what was under the house. That's why she married my father. Why she stayed close. She was trying to reclaim it. She was born before you, Ilda said, but she was rejected by the pulse. Her frequency was too unstable. The safe didn't open for her, so she waited. She watched. And when you were born, She knew. You were the one. I felt sick. Like my skin was made of glass, and my blood had turned to mercury. So she tried to erase me. She tried to be you. I returned to the house that night, just before the storm hit. Lightning danced across the windows as I descended into the basement one last time. I opened the safe, pulled out the third journal, the final one, and found one last page marked in red ink. When she comes for you, don't fight her reflection. Burn it. As I read those words, the basement door slammed shut. Clarice or Celeste stood at the top of the stairs. Cloaked in black, her eyes wild and strangely familiar. She descended slowly, each step echoing like a countdown. You weren't supposed to find it, she hissed. You were supposed to forget, and you were supposed to die with your lies. I snapped. She reached into her coat and pulled something I hadn't seen in years. The bronze key. I found another, she said. There were two. Then she did something I wasn't ready for. She walked past me, straight to the safe, inserted her key, and the entire wall began to shift. Not just a door, this time. The whole wall cracked open like a mouth unsealing after centuries. Behind it, stairs, carved in stone, leading down. The pulse had been beneath the safe all along, and now it was awake. The stairs behind the safe pulsed with a faint blue light, alive like veins beneath skin. The walls weren't stone anymore, they were something else. Something older, breathing, almost wet. They whispered, not with voices, but with memories. Clarice, or Celeste, didn't hesitate. She stepped down into the glowing dark like she belonged there, her silhouette shrinking with every step. I followed, my legs trembling, not from fear, but from something deeper. Recognition. I had been here before. Not in this life, but maybe in another. At the base of the stairs, the corridor opened into a massive cavern. It defied logic, far too vast to exist under a suburban home. The ceiling disappeared into darkness. Strange symbols glowed along the walls, reacting to our presence. And in the center stood it, a black stone monolith, pulsing like a heart, floating inches off the ground, radiating a soundless hum that vibrated in my bones. The pulse. Clarice turned, her eyes reflecting the light like silver blades. You were never meant to find this, she said. It was mine. No, I said, stepping forward. You were rejected. You stole our father's love, tried to erase our mother. And now you want to rewrite everything. Her lips curled. Because I was stronger. Smarter. I waited, I planned. All you did was cry in corners and read dead words. She reached out and placed her palm on the pulse. It shuddered. The walls flickered with moving images, people, faces, memories that weren't ours. Some ancient, some futuristic. A tapestry of time itself. Clarice gasped as if inhaling a lifetime. But then the pulse reacted violently. It flashed red. The air tightened. The monolith hissed and rejected her. Clarice screamed, her body convulsed, her skin splitting like parchment. And in the flashes of red light, I saw her true face. Not just older, inhuman. A distortion. Her soul had been worn down by decades of pretending to be someone she wasn't. The pulse was rejecting the lie. She collapsed to the ground, gasping, twitching. Her mouth opened, and in a distorted voice, she whispered, "It was supposed to be me." And then she was still. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was expectant. The pulse turned toward me, not physically, but energetically. Like a wave turning toward the shore. My body buzzed, my hands itched, my blood felt like it was boiling and freezing at once. I stepped forward. And I heard my mother's voice. You are the final vessel. The blood, chosen by time. The door and the key. I don't know if it was real or memory or both, but her words filled me with something fierce. I reached out. My palm hovered inches from the pulse. Then I touched it. Everything exploded in light. My mind fractured or expanded. I saw the world split like glass, showing layers beneath. One where my mother lived. One where I was never born. One where the house was a hospital, or a ruin, or a temple. Time bent, and then I was the pulse. I was every ancestor, every secret, every ritual. I felt their fear, their strength, their choice, and I made mine. I pulled the pulse into me. There was no explosion, no screams, just silence, and when I opened my eyes, I was lying on the floor of the basement. The wall was sealed. The safe was closed. The house was quiet. Clarice was gone. No body, no trace, as if she'd never existed at all. In the weeks that followed, the couple who bought the house called me. They said something was wrong. That the house felt different. cold, or watching. They didn't want it anymore. I bought it back. Cheap. Legally. It was mine again. But now I understood. It was always mine. I live here now. Alone, but not truly. The pulse is quiet. For now. Sometimes I hear footsteps on the basement stairs. Sometimes I see my mother in the mirror, just behind my reflection. And sometimes, when the moon is full and the air grows still, I hear the house breathe. Because it remembers. And so do I.